El Presidente is present, so we only have myself today. Councilman Parks and Councilman Koretz are not available, so we do not have quorum. Therefore, anything that I do approve will be sent out as a communication from the chair. And we do have consent items.
Okay.
It's only me.
Absolutely.
But, so these would also go out as communications to the chair, right? So items 12, 14, 15, I will move as matters for recommendation to approve. And item number 1.
Item number 1 is an Office of Finance report relative to tax classifications for business utilizing the internet as the primary means to provide services.
This is a fine mess you've got us into, Mr. Garcetti. Mr. Garcetti, I understand you wanted to make comments regarding this matter.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll cheat out to use a theater term, if you will, so that my back isn't to everybody. But thank you very much for allowing me to speak at the outset, and thank you for having this before us in committee. We know that one of the most important areas that we can work as a city is going to be in new industries that are providing revenue and where we're competitive with other parts of the country. There are certain things we're always going to have: our hospitality industry, our tourism industry. Those jobs can't be exported away. But we do know that there's considerable number of services and online retail, online services that can very much land as easily in Tulsa as, or in Silicon Valley, or in Florida, or in North Carolina as they can in Los Angeles. One of the exciting things about Los Angeles is that we do have the preponderance of some great startup online companies, internet-based companies that have really provided great jobs for Angelenos, but that we want to work very closely to retain. And so the motion that I and Councilmember Rosendahl introduced with your assistance and others was to look at what we could do to classify and to look at the methodology where a number of companies have come to us and said, look, I can just as easily be in Glendale, I can just as easily be in Santa Monica. In fact, this means a lot to my bottom line. The city's gross receipts tax is the difference between whether or not we renew our rents and our lease agreements. What can you do to help us? And again, these are not companies that are predominantly stealing business from other LA companies. In fact, for instance, one company in my district, LegalZoom.com, which is headquartered on Hollywood Boulevard, is a $100 million plus company, incorporated 1 out of 4 businesses in California last year. So out of all the businesses that incorporated, a quarter of them went through LegalZoom.com. And you can look at that throughout the country. Shopzilla, which is another one that I know we've talked about, is literally a block away from Santa Monica. They're a huge online purchasing and retail site. And because of that, I think it's incumbent upon us not just to look at what reclassification may do to losing some revenue, but really the comparison is to what if they didn't exist in LA altogether. It's kind of like the runaway production stuff that you and I are working on. The state of California kept saying for many years, we can't afford to give payroll tax incentives. And guess what? There are 0 feature films in California. So it certainly would have been cheaper to give some credit back and earn some tax dollars than none. Same approach here. And the Office of Finance has done a great job enforcing the laws as we have them. What's most important is for us to be able to write them in a way that deals with that new reality. The Office of Finance report that analyzed this doesn't quite get to where we need to be, though they did a very good job. They projected a $10.6 million revenue loss. The Los Angeles Chamber hired Beacon Economics, an outside consultant, to do an independent analysis, and they came in with a discrepancy of about $6 million based on the same analysis of the same NACIS codes that the Office of Finance used. And they also compared the cost of doing business in LA with neighboring cities. And they're, I know, scheduled to present their findings today in committee. But I have a letter that I've submitted to you today that asks you to move forward with asking the CAO to hire an outside consultant to provide a relatively expedited economic impact analysis, taking into consideration both of those reports, so that we can ask the Office of Finance to provide a breakdown of projected revenue loss per business classification, an explanation of the sampling process it used on the 8,000 businesses to try to figure out what that discrepancy is, And then lastly, to clarify how businesses were determined to be likely to be eligible for the proposed draft ordinance, and then to offer options for developing actual revenue impact rather than estimated revenue impact. And to their credit, Office of Finance said they didn't have, they recognized their inability to provide a complete economic analysis.
Do we have an effective description of why this class of businesses versus others?
There's no easy answer, and they can probably more articulately put it forward. But for instance, LegalZoom.com does some legal service work, so it would normally be taxed either as legal services and or retail. For instance, when they sell wills, forms that you can buy at Staples, for instance, that are taxed at a retail rate as well. The difference for me is trying to figure out where that is taking business from a traditional lawyer here in Los Angeles and where we're stealing business because of the internet, essentially from North Carolina. We're helping businesses in Illinois. We're bringing revenues through the city of LA, of which we can extract a little bit of taxes from, but otherwise that business will just relocate elsewhere. I've had conversations, for instance, with LegalZoom.com, and they have a deadline of March. And they're looking at Glendale, and they say, we anticipate growth of maybe 2 or 3-fold in the next few years. We'll go public at a $300 to $400 million company. The delta of the city's business tax versus no business tax is enough to cost us literally millions of dollars when we go public. So we'd love to stay here, but right now we're being taxed.
The thing is that the finance report identifies 8,000 businesses that would fall into this category of relief, and therefore, would we be able to provide the same kind of anecdotal evidence for 8,000 different businesses? So that, I think the $10 million, I don't know whether, we don't know. We don't need to know today, because I'm fine with getting an independent analysis for the exact same reasons you wanted. You could have very simply said move it forward without the analysis, but the $10 million was a little...
Well, it's important, I think. As a budget-minded person, you and I both care about those numbers, too.
Yeah, and so the question is, we might need to focus a little more and identify within the classification a tighter set that would produce the results that you're looking for to keep business in LA, at the same time that doesn't allow others who aren't going to extract the same benefit, who aren't going to move, aren't going to change, or that it's not going to make a difference one way or the other, except reduce our taxes.
Right.
So I think that might be what we need the consultant to look at, is maybe honing in on the truly impacted.
Yeah, well, maybe we can suggest that our CLA do that with the Office of Finance. Is there a way of being able to disentangle that piece? The economic consultant may be able to do that if the CAO retains somebody.
Now, why wouldn't we want to? You didn't want to send this to BTAC, and I was just curious at this point. Now that we're going to slow
we
it
expect
down,
BTAC not to have their first package. We expect pretty quick results from them, but they're only going to be constituted now in December, meet in January. We've got businesses that are making their decisions in the first 3 months, and we expect BTAC to have their first package back sometime in March. That would put people up at the deadline of literally when their lease runs out.
So when is this? When do you expect to have this back?
I think if we can have something in late January, I think we can still retain some of these important businesses in Los Angeles. And it's really not asking to start from scratch. It's asking what were the two methodologies here. And you're right. I've been thinking along the same lines. What can we do to possibly look at business tax categories without being unfair to the other businesses that are out there? If you're doing a great bulk of your business outside of the LA city because of the use of the internet, what can we do to kind of call that out and retain that?
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I do
Appreciate it,
have
Mr.
some
Chair.
public comment cards. Did we want to get a report from finance?
I think Beacon Economics is ready to
And Beacon? Beacon is here?
Yeah.
Okay, you can both come forward.
Deputy City Attorney Dan Whitley. I believe the Director of Finance is at another committee meeting right now. She wasn't expecting to be here quite so early, but she's on her way.
Okay, thank you. Fire away.
Okay. Hi, my name is John Haveman. I'm a founding principal of Beacon Economics, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I was, as mentioned, I was hired by the Chamber of Commerce to do an analysis essentially of the analysis that was done by the Department of Finance or the Office of Finance. So I have done that, and I've augmented that with other information regarding some of the incentives that a bunch of these firms might in fact have to move at the present time that are somewhat unique to the current economic environment. So the first exercise that we undertook was an attempt to refine the set of NAICS codes that were perhaps likely to be affected by the proposed motion. And what we found was that the likely set of revenues to be affected was much narrower than, in fact, the Office of Finance suggested. And in our evaluation, we used Dun & Bradstreet data, which you know, it's their job, it's their way of making money to get these things right, to get the classifications of various industries right. So we have some faith in the data that they were able to provide us, along with data from California EDD.
Are you talking about the 8,000 figure they used?
No, I'm not entirely sure where their 8,000 figure came from.
Okay.
Even using a very generous definition under these NAICS codes, I had a hard time coming up with 8,000 firms that might be affected. We were more in the neighborhood of 5,000 to 6,000 firms. Yet when we called out through, if not an exhaustive but an exhausting process, we called out firms that we thought were perhaps included, but very unlikely to, in fact, be affected. Our results were much smaller than from the Office of Finance. We found that in fact there were probably conservatively, meaning a high estimate, I think about 4.67 million in revenues that are at risk. And I use the term at risk loosely because they're probably at risk anyways if you don't lower their tax rate. So what we found, I think in a nutshell, differs from the Office of Finance partly because they used a narrow interpretation of what is an existing multimedia classification that currently gives a lot of these firms a lower tax rate, and because they used a broader interpretation of some language that actually is in their own report, that is without any substantial intermediation.
Can I ask you something? Have you two talked?
We have not talked. We have not
Okay.
had an opportunity.
Yeah, so maybe you should introduce yourself.
Yes, Antoinette Cristobal. I'm the general manager of the Office of Finance, and I apologize for being late. I was over in IT,
you weren't late.
Information Technology Committee, because I understood that the empowerment zone was going to be heard first there, and I would come over here. So I apologize for being late. I don't know the individual here. Hi.
John Haveman. I'm founding principal of Beacon Economics.
I love to bring
okay,
people
all right.
together.
So obviously we have not spoken and we have not met. So
Yeah, well, he wrote the Beacon Economics report on this. Are you familiar with the Beacon Economics report?
no, I have
Okay,
not seen a report.
We're going to move forward. I certainly don't have a problem with the recommendations by Mr. Garcetti, but in addition to that, I think we might be able to extrapolate a lot of benefits if you two just work together, and there may be some points of agreement you could find just by understanding, what your study was focused on and what your study was focused on. There may be some simple answers that might produce a better product. So I would recommend that as we go forward, regardless of us hiring an outside consultant to do the analysis. It'd be great if all three entities would come in with agreement. But my primary concern is are we, with 5,000, that's still a large class to me. Do we really want to impact such a wide breadth without knowing specifically?
That was the set of potentially impacted firms.
Right.
I think we narrowed it down to a much smaller set of firms.
Okay, so you're
Perhaps 1 to 2,000.
1 to 2,000, and you're coming up with an alternative definition for classifying them?
Yes, it's a subset of the NAICS codes that were used by the office.
Well, I'm sure you would like to work with them on that. but-
Absolutely, absolutely. We
Yeah.
definitely want to get this resolved. So we're very open to working with this individual as well as anyone else who would like to participate in the process. I have not seen their report, so I can't speak to it. This is the first I've heard of it as of
Has anybody in your office seen it?
No.
no.
Well, there's part of the problem. Mr. Garcetti, may I ask,
The chamber did it, so I'm just reading it myself right now, but I can give you my copy. I'm sure we'll get next one done.
the chamber had this analysis prepared.
No,
So you
I
can-
was
you
aware.
Can, you
I
can
was
figure
aware that
out what was said in
yeah.
it, but the point I'm trying to make is that do you still want to move forward with this, or do you want to see if we can?
Good to move forward to reconcile, and they can certainly be a part of that. I mean, it's not like reconcile without them.
So you still want to go forward with this? I'm fine with it, but what I'd like to do is my intent would be, before I take the public comment cards, is to continue this matter and bring it on the next agenda so we can see if maybe you reconcile some things, so that when the consultant does do their work, they'll at least have a clear picture of what your agreements and what your disagreements are, and that would be helpful. So we don't have to go into great depth today. I think the first thing that needs to happen is you have to have a meeting of the minds on some of this stuff, and I think a lot of that's going to happen naturally. I mean, you want to reduce the class. I mean, there's
We
no
definitely
question
want
about
to
that.
make things much easier, business friendly.
And Mr.
Provide
Garcetti wants to
opportunities.
hone in on those businesses that are going to be leaving, as opposed to all the 8,000 businesses that you're identifying.
Right. We definitely want to. I think the issue will definitely be relative to the revenue impact, and I think that's something that is of concern that would need to be vetted. But certainly, looking at ways to provide opportunities for these internet-based businesses is something that we have been working closely with.
Okay, our next meeting is going to be the 12th of January. And between now and then, I'm sure you can come up with some agreements. Maybe we can sit down at some point before that as well. But I would urge you to work together. I think there's going to be some commonality of interest in all of this. In the meantime, we can still hire an independent consultant to see if we can hone in even more on what we're trying to extrapolate here.
Mr. Chair, if I could just say that I was aware that the Chamber was going to be releasing a report, but this is the first time I've seen it as of now.
Okay,
So,
okay. But you can make certain
Absolutely.
assumptions about the report. So.
Okay. I will review
Certain
it.
assumptions, not all of them. So, okay, well, I don't want to belabor this issue. We have some direction. We're not going to finalize it, certainly, with a recommendation out of this committee. I would like to take the public comment at this time. I believe, yes, we want to start with John Haveman. Oh, you're John Haveman. Okay, you're in. Okay, public comment. Sam Garrison. Hey, Sam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and a special thank you to Council President Garcetti's office and the Mayor's business team and the Department of Finance for working with us.
Oh, he left already, so you don't have to. You can skip all those formalities.
I apologize that you didn't receive the report. It was completed late on Friday, so probably hasn't trickled down to the Department of Finance, but we want to make sure that everybody gets together. And the independent analysis we do support. As you know, we're pushing for the creation of an Office of Independent Economic Analysis at the city, and we think that'll help these discussions become a little bit more robust in the future. As you know, with the economy the way it is, and with businesses being able to operate in different parts of the country and the world, that trying to attract and retain these businesses here in LA is issue number one. And we think supporting both this issue and also Creator Syndicate, which is the next item, is one of the most direct ways we can attract and retain jobs in the city. And we also want to do it in a way that it doesn't compromise the revenue, especially at this time when the city's facing such a significant budget shortfall. But we also don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater and try to do all that we can to show these companies that they're not only welcome out in LA, but valued. And we believe that both item number one and finding clarification on item number two are two very good ways in doing that. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, but we look forward to working with your office in the coming weeks.
No, thank you very much. Blythe Holden?
Thank you, Councilman, for your time today. I'm Blythe Holden from Shopzilla. I'm one of the at-risk companies, and I just wanted to take a few seconds just to describe ourselves and just to iterate that I'm really enthusiastic, passionate about this position because I feel like Los Angeles is the place for our company. We're comfortable here. We've been here for 10 years. We've been previously self-classifying in multimedia for the last 10 years and paying about $250,000 in tax every year. We've grown from a garage to about 230 employees now, and they're extremely highly skilled workers. We have over 100 software engineers, and our average pay across the company is over $130,000, which is like 3 times the national average. And the change in classification from our audit is really, it really is detrimental to our bottom line, such that when our lease is up in 2010, it's forcing us to, mid-2010, it's forcing us to consider other real estate locations.
Can I ask you, your classification was originally designated when?
We've been self-reporting in multimedia for the last 10 years.
10 years. So 10 years ago, and the audit generated a request to pay all the back taxes?
It's a 3-year
limit.
3 years plus interest and penalties. So the penalty part of it is just over $3 million in total. Plus, on a go-forward, our tax changes from $250,000 a year approximately to over $1 million a year, about $1.2 million a year.
Okay. And
So that's essentially like $1 million additional
and
rent.
what was the change?
We're put into professions and occupations, the highest tax
And you were
class.
in what?
Multimedia.
Multimedia.
There's been a multimedia section, for about 12 years, and it's been, so it was written in the late 90s, and I think in the late 90s we didn't really have a clear conception of what was to come in terms of internet and media companies, and so that language has previously been kind of interpreted more generously, more broadly. The last line of it says, it has 3 different subcategories, and the last line of it says includes, companies that develop online and internet services, including the design of websites for clients. And it's the only code actually the only section in all the code that even mentions the internet. And we're an internet-only service, and our service is exclusively for our
There's
online.
no other description of internet anywhere on the code?
No. So multimedia.
Did you appeal? Is there you appealed this?
Yes, and our appeal has been put on hold while this issue was brought forward here. We did go before the Board of Review, but they didn't issue a decision.
Maybe you can help me out here.
Well, I think the direction from the Office of Finance was that they were taking a harder stance, a more narrow stance on what should be included in the multimedia category and what really qualifies as an internet company there. But truthfully, we believe that when it was passed, former Mayor Riordan, it was under his watch, that, as he said, it was meant to include companies of the future, and they didn't write it, perhaps in the best way. And I think that
Sounds like Mayor Riordan.
yeah, and
But anyway,
I think that the new language maybe is too broad. The new language that came out of the legal assistance and is including too many other.
There was no
make
finding
codes.
of
I don't know.
delinquency?
I don't know how much I can speak about the taxpayer's account, so
Yeah.
I'm going to try to be as discreet as possible because of confidentiality clause. But this particular company, they were never audited, and this was their first audit. So I think they've been in the city for, I think you said 12 years, give or take. And so
10,
when a business registers with the city of Los Angeles,
They
they
self-register,
self-register.
right.
We've been audited for other purposes, just to be clear. Related to property tax or the other things, but not on this item.
Right, okay, for business tax purposes. They self-register, they self-classify themselves. And so I would have to assume that they self-classified themselves as multimedia, which was what was in the system. But when they were audited, it was found that they were not properly classified. And so our office, completed the audit. They are in the hearing process, the hearing stage, as she mentioned. We placed it on hold.
There's a
because-
concept in the law that if a local jurisdiction doesn't act on fixing somebody's impropriety, that it gets a pass.
Well, it's a
We're discovering this in the billboard issue.
Well-
that if we didn't cite them within 5 years, then they're non-conforming use and proper use, and so this strikes me as the same kind of thing. 10 years in operation and we did nothing about it.
This is a little different. It's a tax, and we have an obligation to collect what is owed to the city.
But we can't
don't
sneak
audit.
up from behind somebody and catch them after 10 years.
There are 400,000 businesses in the city of Los Angeles.
How many
we
have
only
this
audit
circumstance?
about 2% or 7,000, which gets us to, which is equivalent to industry standards for audits. So we don't audit every single account. We don't have the staff to do that, nor would that be something that is best practice. So in this particular case, this company was selected. We have a number of risk measures that we use to determine who should be audited and who should not. And this particular company was selected for audit. And based on the audit, we did find that they were misclassified. But we have placed it on hold. It's held in abeyance. We haven't made a decision. The board hasn't made a decision as of yet, because what we talked about and agreed is that we would work on the new internet classification with the expectation that this particular company would fall under it. And I believe based on what we have presently today.
But as a result of this one action,
No, there were other businesses
as a result
that have
of
been
this
audited.
one action, the mayor now wants to eliminate all back tax payments, and Councilman Garcetti is changing the business classification. So penny wise, pound foolish, maybe, huh?
Well, there were a number of businesses that have been audited that had self-registered and classified themselves under multimedia that we have found as a result of an audit that they were misclassified. So I think that raised a lot of concern within the industry that something needed to be done to look at preserving internet-based businesses in LA. And so as a result of that, we were tasked with working with the mayor's office, the various council offices who had businesses that were impacted, as well as the city attorney's office, to come forward with a new tax classification, internet tax classification. And so that was the reason why it's been brought forward for consideration.
Yeah. Well, okay. As I said, if I were specifically looking at this appeal, what I would particularly focus in on was the definition in the code and whether or not this business falls in any way, shape, or form into that definition. And if it's the only one that says internet, I believe it's the only one that applies.
It's the code is.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Just one moment. I think that's very true. I think it's just that given the auditing officer, they see the word service in our business too, and so they say professional services. But this is the only section that references the internet. We're exclusively developing online services.
Clearly, and I that's what I find troubling here. You take a general category like professional. What is it?
Professions and occupations.
For lawyers
Professions
and
and
accountants.
occupation. What does that mean?
It's for lawyers and accountants.
Well, I get
It's
that,
for
but
service. It's for businesses who provide a service. The internet.
that's not what it sounds like.
The internet classification is very narrow. It's not broadly as being interpreted by some businesses who have self-registered
So what is
and
internet
self-classified
under-
themselves. It's more specific. Do you want to cite?
Sure.
This is Ed Cabrera of.
Ed Cabrera, Chief of the Tax Permit Division. The multimedia classification does indeed have three particular descriptions of what that activity may entail. As was indicated, the very last classification does speak to a business which designs websites for clients and also provides online services in a very narrow sense. Again, because of confidentiality provisions of the municipal code, we're not at liberty to go into detail regarding the particular taxpayer. But what we can say is that it is at the second stage of the appeal process, and based on the definitions, not only within the multimedia classification, but also the provisions of the professions and occupations classification, which is a catch-all provision of the municipal code. The code reads that if a business activity is not specifically mentioned or taxed under any other provision of the municipal code, then it does fall under the professions and occupations classification. And just to note, it is not only
Say that again?
The professions and occupations classification, it's a catch-all provision. So if a business's activity is not specifically addressed under any other section of the municipal code, then the qualifying classification is 21190 or currently 21.49. So the professions and occupations classification is not solely limited to service providers such as doctors, attorneys, and CPAs. Other types of services which are not specifically addressed in the municipal code do fall under the 21190, 2149 classification. There are specific and very limited definitions of the multimedia classification, and that's the basis for audits actions with any taxpayer.
Well, I interrupted our public comment period. I'd like to go back to it, but as I said, penny wise, pound foolish. We're going to lose. I guarantee you that we are going to lose more dollars than you generated in this audit. I guarantee it. Bet the house on it. From a public policy perspective, no way. And I think if the problem was that you should have come to us with a specific definition that worked, that proactivity wasn't there. The proactivity to go and throw somebody into a category that puts their business future in a whirlwind was your first response. But your first response should have been, we got to fix this, instead of waiting till the LA Times does it. Not the way to do business, not the way to do government, not the way to serve people. So we'll be hearing about this some more, but I'd like to call the next public comment. Thank you very much. Is that Nicole? I took my glasses off.
Yes.
Shahanian? Yes.
Good afternoon. I just wanted to echo the sentiments of Council President Garcetti, as well as Shopzilla and the LA Chamber. I'm sorry, Nicole Shahanian with the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce. We, like Council President Garcetti, are very concerned on how this is going to affect one of our fastest growing employers, which is LegalZoom.com. And LegalZoom currently employs 300 people, is expected to expand between 600 and 900 people in the very near future, and we want to encourage the council to take another look at these definitions and go for something that's a little broader and definitely add some clarifying language here that would account for that. LegalZoom is in the very similar position as Shopzilla. They also were self-classified and have then been asked to be moved to the professional services category, which the CEO has now told us if this isn't resolved, he'll be forced to move to either Glendale or Burbank. And I don't think in this economy that we can afford to have our businesses relocate. So we just encourage you to expedite this as soon as possible and keep our employers here in LA.
Yeah, let me be clear. I don't think the problem is well, let me just say, I think the way to resolve this is to create a new business classification that captures this particular industry. The issue isn't just saying one business leaving. I mean, we should negotiate on the basis of one business. But in this case, there's clearly an ambiguity in the code, or at least a category that doesn't truly capture this industry, and it doesn't recognize it, and we need to update the code to take that into consideration. Once we do that, then these industries hopefully we'll be in a more competitive position to retain these and grow that industry.
And these are businesses that want to be here. They came to Hollywood and Los Angeles for a specific reason, and
It was the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce, or that's the reason?
No, I'm sorry. They wanted it.
Anyway, well, thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, so then I would concur with Mr. Garcetti and recommend that we request the Chief Accounting Office to hire an outside consultant to provide an economic impact analysis, taking into consideration the consultant work commissioned by the LA Chamber of Commerce to provide a similar analysis. And two, request the Office of Finance and CAO provide additional analysis on revenue impact portion of OFF report, Office of Finance report. The analysis should provide specific detail on the following: a breakdown of the projected revenue loss per business classification, and explanation of the sampling process it used on the 8,010 businesses to provide the aforementioned revenue impact, and clarify how businesses were determined to be likely to be eligible for the proposed draft ordinance, and offer options for developing actual revenue impact rather than estimated revenue impact, and proposals for limiting revenue. I would further add that I recommend that the Office of Finance come back with a recommendation as to an alternative category of definition that would clarify this issue with regard to these internet-related businesses, and also direct the Office of Finance to meet with the consultants at Beacon Economics, the preparers of the LA Chamber report, which is assumed in item number 1, but I'll just state it for the record. And prior to moving forward with Mr. Garcetti's requests, at the next meeting, if we could have a brief conversation about if there was any resolution in that conversation, so that we could avoid so that we can minimize the need for the outside economic analysis. With that, item number 2.
Councilman?
Yes.
Just to clarify, is it just the CAO to report on these items?
No, it says Chief Accounting Office for number 1, Office of Finance and CAO provide additional analysis. That's item number 2.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Item number 2. Oh, tax administrative appeals process decisions and reclassifications. Thought we did that. Now you're on.
Good afternoon, Deputy City Attorney Dan Whitley.
Okay.
Who's taking the
I'm going
lead
to
here?
speak.
Okay.
Antoinette Cristoval, Office of Finance General Manager. This particular report is in response to the mayor directing the Office of Finance to prepare and submit a report for council's consideration relative to a proposed amendment to the Los Angeles Municipal Code to prohibit the city from collecting back taxes, including interest and penalties owed as a result of an administrative board overruling an earlier board's decision. The mayor also asked that finance propose a rule against taxpayer reclassification, provided there is no change in a taxpayer's business's model or operation for a fixed period of years. The mayor further stated that the proposed code amendments should be narrowly defined or narrowly written and in a way as to retroactively apply to any impacted business. As I indicated earlier, the business tax is a self-reporting tax. That is, businesses self-classify, self-report, and pay their tax. Until an audit is conducted, it is not known if the business has self-classified itself in the appropriate tax category. I also mentioned earlier about we have 400,000 businesses registered with the city, and about 7,000 are audited each year. Businesses have 2 options or 2 levels of appeal if they disagree with the audit finding. The first level is the assessment review officer appeal, where they can go and appeal their tax case. The second level is the Board of Review, which is a 3-member panel. About 2% or 150 of the businesses that are audited actually appeal their tax matter, and less than 1% go to the second level at the Board of Review. We have found through our research that there has only been one case where the board's decision was overturned by a subsequent board. And in both cases, the auditor's findings relative to the classification was the same. We also conducted a review and found that other taxing agencies follow the same approach, where
With regard to what?
they collect back taxes even though a subsequent board overruled an earlier decision.
Yeah, but you can't. You're comparing apples to oranges. At least I don't know what I don't know what their codes say. If their codes are clearly defined, then there's no problem with me. The problem here is that we had this definition for a category that Mayor Reardon created specifically to inspire businesses to locate here, specifically to address businesses of the future, and there's some ambiguity as to which classification they would fall under.
Sir, if I could
Yeah.
say, this is a little different. This is where the board overruled an earlier board's decision.
I understand.
And so it's an isolated matter, isolated
But it's
basically.
still dependent on the specificity of the definitions in the code. So
Right,
I
the
don't know
class-
what's in their code.
The classification.
All I know is what's in our code.
Okay.
I mean, I can't tell you that, maybe they have a separate classification for these kinds of businesses.
Excuse me if I may, sir.
Yeah.
This did not involve a multimedia
Right.
type of classification. This
So
involved.
what? I'm sorry.
This involved a taxpayer who was classified under a different classification
Oh, I'm
under
sorry.
the LA
So
Municipal Code.
You're saying this is a different one?
Yes.
Correct. This was a different classification. The
But
original.
the mayor wants us to, or at least he proposed that we not charge back taxes for anybody that.
Where the board overruled an earlier decision. And we are, we're recommending that the council, subject to the mayor's approval, instruct the city attorney's office to draft an ordinance that would preclude the city from doing so. This is an isolated case, and also for the city attorney to consider the
But
retroactive
in order
application.
for us to, what are the findings that the board has to make? Is there a process to determine if there was any delinquency involved here?
Oh, yeah.
Well, the board in general, depending on what the particular facts are, what the issues are, can address different issues of the audit. It can address classification issues. It can address issues regarding
You're
apportionment.
not going to answer my question, are you?
Well, I'm attempting to. What the board addresses could be delinquency issues,
Okay,
but
so
it
the
all.
board does address delinquency.
Yes,
Yes,
absolutely.
in terms of assessment, correct.
Absolutely.
And therefore, it may impose a penalty or may not?
The board doesn't impose the penalty. The penalty would be applied during the course of the audit findings, but a taxpayer always does have the ability to request a waiver of the penalty, depending on what the particular facts are for that request.
So if they thought they were in the right category, I mean, was there a finding in the case that created the situation? Was there a finding that this person should have known?
Whether they should have known, I don't know that was the finding. What the audit staff determined was that a taxpayer was misclassified. As far as to whether it was intentionally misclassified or whether the taxpayer should have
So
known.
when somebody opens a business, is there some kind of list of all the classifications, and it's like a checkoff, and you go down it and you say, well, I think I'm this one, and if I'm this one, then I pay this much. If I'm this one, I pay this much.
Yeah, we
So
actually.
there's really an incentive to go to the lowest price you can find, right? That's a dumb way to do things.
We actually have on our website, and we have information available about the various business tax categories, extensive information on our website, as well as information on the application.
But did I
that they-
describe the process correctly? They basically get an application with a list of all the various categories?
No, the application doesn't have all the categories. It has relevant information that they have to fill out about their business activity. What type of activity are you in? The information about the tax categories is available by hard copy and on our website, which explains if you are this type of business, your activity is such, then you fall into this particular tax category, and that is a tax category that you should register under.
Okay, so they describe their activities in accordance with the cheapest code.
Well, I can't say that they do that. It is, I guess, likely, but what they should be doing is describing their activity and classifying themselves under the proper code based upon the description of their type of business and the Los Angeles Municipal Code for that particular business tax category. So it's something that they should be utilizing to determine what they fall under, and of course we are available to help as well. Should there be questions, sometimes taxpayers come into our public counter office and we assist them. We try to get as much information as we can to help them properly classify themselves in the appropriate business tax category.
Okay. I guess I'm grappling with what I now know is, in my own opinion, a very ambiguous system that encourages, subliminally, if you will, businesses to try to find the lowest tax rate. So they'll define their activities to meet their tax rate needs. And it's not going to be a problem where you have clearly defined classifications and businesses that are akin to that, so clearly that there's no issue, which is probably most of them.
Mm-hmm.
But in new categories of business industry and in businesses where they do a lot of different things, I think it's just ripe for problems. And in this particular case, what exacerbates the problem is that we really audit so few of them that we can't keep up. Where we have hundreds of thousands of businesses out there, we can't possibly keep up. So it takes us a long time to find people who miscategorized, and then we go back and try to collect the tax. I don't think a business would have a problem if you came in the next month and reclassified them. I don't think they'd have a problem with that. It is what it is. But when you come back 10 years later and say you're going to have to pay 3 years back taxes, that's a problem, particularly when the growth of that business was dependent on the other underlying assumption that the first designation was correct. So how do you resolve that?
Well, I mean, sir, if I could add, in terms of best practices and what other taxing agencies do in terms of auditing businesses, we are well within line of the best practices. As a matter of fact, we are ahead of other taxing agencies such as the Internal Revenue Service, the Franchise Tax Board. I think the State Board of Equalization, their audit penetration rate, which is the number of accounts audited, is slightly higher than the City of Los
But you're not telling me
Angeles.
how to get better.
I think the way to get better is to, certainly continue to refine the business tax code, which is why BTAC has been established, to take a second look at it, to look at other ways to attract and retain businesses while preserving the city's revenue base. I think that's
will you be
important.
recommending different categories to BTAC?
What I would propose is, I think there are a number of, which I think is the next item on your agenda, there are a number of motions that have been introduced looking at various industries and classifications that I think should be vetted by the Business Tax Advisory Committee. They did, by the way, review the business tax code. There was an in-depth analysis of the city's business tax code back in 2004, and it was commissioned by the city using an outside consultant working with the Business Tax Advisory Committee. We collectively overhauled the business tax code, which became the 2004 overhaul. Now we're going with phase 2, which is the new BTAC, to further refine and find ways to improve and attract businesses. So I think the approach that is in place now will certainly address some of the emerging technologies that otherwise have not been included and other ways to improve.
So do you see a need for a definition for the internet industry?
I think the proposed internet ordinance that we work collectively with the mayor, city council, CLA, and city attorney on is a good start. I think the only issue right now is there's a discussion about, is it really 8,000 businesses or something less, and is the revenue really, the loss really 10.6 million, or I don't know exactly what's in their report, but 4 million. I think that's something that we could work collectively on and come back, as you have suggested.
That's a different issue. I was just asking if you think there's a need for the internet reclassification.
I think there's a need to address the internet industry because of
What other
the
industries
emergency.
might be reclassified?
Well, at this point, I think it's more of the internet.
Or redefined, I should say.
I think, one of the areas that we should look at, and we are proposing to look at, is dealing with industries that attract jobs, and one is the film industry. And so part of what BTAC has been charged with is looking at how we can improve and attract and retain jobs in the film industry. That crosses the board. It's not just the large film companies. You have, the companies that cater, and the smaller businesses that are impacted as well. And so that's part of what's going to be included in the overall analysis.
Okay, well, do we have a couple of cards on? Yeah, we have a couple of cards on this. Let me take those cards. Did you have anything else to add?
Not at this time. We're working on drafting the ordinance to address the specific problem that was pointed out by the Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa, which was to address...
Mayor who?
Antonio Villaraigosa. Did I say that incorrectly? I'm sorry.
I just wanted to hear it twice. Having a name like Alarcon, I relate.
But the problem we were tasked with addressing was the situation where a taxpayer has had an earlier board of review and then has a subsequent board of review that changes their classification to one which will impose a higher tax rate. And that's the problem that we're addressing procedurally. Excuse me?
What happens when we should have done a lower rate?
Well, when there's a lower tax rate, the taxpayer generally doesn't complain, and so we don't need to be concerned with that.
But shouldn't we be concerned if we're taxing somebody inappropriately?
If we are taxing somebody inappropriately earlier, then
caveat emptor, is that what it is?
Well, let's back up a second. If we have an earlier board of review hearing and they make a mistake and it's in the taxpayer's favor, then we will have to catch that later during an audit, and that's what we're here to address. If we have a board review hearing earlier,
so we'll give them a refund.
We do.
That's the situation we would have now.
If get a refund, absolutely.
And so if we catch it in an audit and the Office of Finance determines that they're inappropriately classified and they're entitled to a refund, they will make that determination and they will be entitled to a refund.
Good. Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah, my intent is to ask the CLA and CAO to review the Office of Finance report and report to the committee in 30 days with potential outcomes associated with the proposed ordinance. I would specifically say that that we need recommendations to tighten the definitions of the various categories. Now, maybe we streamlined them. Is that what we did last time with the BTAC?
Well, we did more than streamline. We actually created a number of tax breaks and exemptions for certain types of
But did you
industries.
streamline the categories?
Yes, we did. We actually reduced the categories from 75 to 9, I think. 9 tax categories. So we substantially simplified the process. I think the real issue or concern is that
Would it have changed anything with regard to these two highlighted cases?
and this is particularly isolated because it's really about an administrative appeals process, regardless of the type of business. It's associated with the board, the appeals board overturning a prior board's decision. So it's very isolated, and this is the only case in my almost 10 years here at the city as the Office of Finance General Manager where I've seen this take place.
We're gonna hear from the CLA and CAO on this matter separately, but okay, I am. By the way, I'm sort of exacerbating these things because we are entering into the BTAC phase,
Right.
and I'm trying to gain as much information as I can. So I'm taking longer on this stuff than I normally would, but it is educational, and I'm going to need that. So with that, I'd like to call up public comment, Jack Newcomb. Might as well bring Rick up too.
Yeah. Jack.
No, you're Jack. That's Rick.
No, I'm actually Rick. That's Jack.
Oh, it's the other way around. I assume you're related.
Pardon me?
I assume you're related.
We are, father and son. And just because we have a family business called Creator Syndicate, which I founded in 1987, headquartered in Los Angeles, we sell columns and cartoons to newspapers. And after self-classifying, for a period of 6 years, in 1993, the Office of Finance came out and audited us and said, no, we think we argued that we were selling wholesale because we would sell a cartoon or a column that would appear, say, in the LA Times, and that was a product sold at retail with a sales tax. So we argued that ours was a component, just like an auto part in an automobile. The Office of Finance argued, no, we're licensing an image, so it should be occupations and professions. And we went through the assessment appeals officer. We then went to appeal to their board of review. I spent tens of thousands of dollars, which I didn't have, out of pocket on lawyers to argue our case. And finally, in 1994, we received a ruling in writing saying we had won and that we were classified as wholesale and retail, but not professions and occupations. Based on that ruling, we relied on it to continue doing business in Los Angeles. We had been looking at office space in El Segundo and in Culver City. In case we lost the ruling, we were then going to move. Well, now this past June, the new Board of Review, which is totally ran roughshod over taxpayers, it's literally a joke, and I can give you examples, said, oh no, we're not bound by the prior rulings, only taxpayers are bound by those rulings. We can do whatever we want. And not only that, we're going to put you in the higher category for 5 years retroactively with interest and penalties. And I was told by our attorney that if we didn't pay something, they were going to destroy our credit. So I had to go to Wells Fargo Bank, take out a loan for $105,000, lay off 2 employees. And so I was furious, and I wrote a column for the Wall Street Journal, went on a lot of radio and television shows. Mayor Villaraigosa called me at home, said he too was outraged. He said, this is ridiculous. We need your business. We need small business in Los Angeles. We want you to stay. I'm going to tell the Office of Finance to amend the code. And I mean, what you just heard a lot of misleading information where they say, well, if the auditors decide the prior board made a mistake, excuse me, if it's a final ruling from the Board of Review, could the taxpayer say, oh, I think they made a mistake, I'm going to ignore it? How do they say they can ignore it? If it's a final, unless the business model changes, of course, or if there's a new law passed. Now, if they had come to the city council and said, we want to pass a new law regarding newspaper syndication, and a law was passed, of course, you can change it. But if it's a ruling from their final authority, the Board of Review, it's final. And how can they say, oh, we're not bound by it? Only taxpayers are bound by it. And I will point out, Mayor Villaraigosa is not the only mayor who called us. Oscar Goodman from Las Vegas called. He said, come and have a martini with me. We'd love to have you in Las Vegas. We received solicitations from 61 cities. Colorado Springs and Albuquerque made the same offer to fly 5 of our executives there, put us in the fanciest hotels in town, find jobs for our employees' spouses. I mean, there's competition for jobs. We love Los Angeles. We want to stay, but we need to see the code amended, not just to get rid of that retroactive business, but also to say that if a board of review makes a ruling that unless the business changes or the law has changed, finance is stuck with it and taxpayers are stuck with it. Otherwise, you never know what your tax rate is. Thank you. I'd love to have a conversation with them while they're here.
Jack?
The only thing that I'm going to add to that is in response to the letter that Ms. Cristoval wrote in response to the mayor's letter, and specifically page 4 of 4, it kind of says, okay, we'll do what the mayor wants to do provided the business falls under the following criteria. And, you know, it really kind of raises my eyebrows, because you have the same people who kind of ran us through a lot of this and gave us a lot of these headaches, writing this letter, coming up with the criteria, eventually evaluating us based on the criteria that they've already written. And my biggest fear is that they'll somehow find a way to continue to make our lives hell and continue to single us out and bully us and pick on us the way that they have previously. I mean, there's no indication that that's not the case. And based on this letter, it's like, okay, well, we're not going to do what the mayor says. We want what the mayor says that he wants to do. And specifically, Creator Syndicate was at an event for St. Raphael's School in inner city LA, and the mayor was there, and we had a conversation with him, and he pointed his finger and he said, we want to keep you in LA. This code better be amended, and if not, you call me directly. And he waved his finger in my face, and he said this to me, and I believe him. And he's a great guy, and I think that he's on our side, and he wants us not to have to deal with this. And just to get into one kind of anecdotal example of the granularity of the criteria is on audits. We talk a lot about audits. 2% of the businesses of 400,000 in LA get audited. So in any given year, one business has the probability of being audited of about 0.00025% chance of being audited. That's 1 out of 400,000. We got audited 2 years ago. So let's just say that this ordinance get passed. If we get audited in the next year or two, I calculated the probability of that happening. It's the same as if you were to take a fair coin, flip it, get tails 24 times in a row. The reason I say that is if we get audited in the next 2 years, think about that. I don't think that there's any other answer other than we're getting picked on. And I don't think that that's what the mayor wants or what you want, keeping jobs in LA.
Thank you. Can I ask the department come back up? I got to ask this question about the Board of Review going back to reconsider the business activity. How do you do that? The testimony was that the Board of Review made a decision in 1990?
1994.
1994.
In writing.
In writing. And that this Board of Review said that their decision doesn't matter.
I think the city
Is there-
attorney should address that.
What had probably had happened, and I can't speak to the specific taxpayer, is that there was a separate audit cycle that came up at some point. And at the end of that audit, an assessment was made, and then the taxpayer has the right to go through the administrative appeals process and ended up at another Board of Review hearing. And the second Board of Review will take a look at the audit that's before it. We'll take a look at the facts that were developed at the audit and apply the law and make a determination. And
Same business activity.
I can't speak to that, but they will apply the law to the facts that are before it and make a determination. And if the prior Board of Review was an error, the second Board of Review will come to a different determination. They'll come to a different result, and they'll uphold the assessment.
That's just wrong.
May I say something?
No. I'm trying to think this through, because it seems to me the board is putting us in a position of liability, because in this case, the business was acting in accordance with a decision that was made by an authority of the city of Los Angeles, and had no reason to believe that they were going to be subsequently charged with practices that the board said was okay.
Well, in that situation, there's the normal rules that would apply when the city would try and collect those taxes would not apply when they've relied on an earlier administrative ruling. Normally, when there's an audit that goes through our process and then the city tries to collect the taxes, the city will collect interest and penalties. When a taxpayer relies on administrative ruling by the city the city is no longer entitled to collect the interest and penalties. There's California case law that sets that standard forward. So there are some differences in the collection process the city can take going forward and under those circumstances. So the taxpayer does have different rights when those and under that audit scenario and collection scenario. So there are differences that come forward because of that procedural process.
Did I just hear you say that the first review, I'm not sure what you just said.
Okay, when there is an earlier determination
In this
by the
case-
administrative body,
case
in
that
this
was
case,
described,
there is under California law, when the city goes forward and then makes a different determination,
Right.
the city is not entitled to collect interest and penalties on that assessment. They can only collect the principal. That's what California law
So
provides.
essentially, they're saying that the first audit was wrong.
The earlier Board of Review determination was incorrect. Correct.
But can they get back taxes?
They can collect the back taxes,
For how long?
the principal. Well, for however long our municipal code would provide for us to go back and collect those taxes.
Is there an administrative remedy to that?
Could
They
you?
felt they were wrong. Can they appeal it further?
Well, the Board of Review is the end of our administrative process. They can then they can either wait for us to bring an affirmative collection action and not pay, or they can pay the taxes and then bring a refund action in Superior Court. So the Board of Review is not the end of the process for the taxpayer. That's the end of our administrative process in the city. They can then litigate it in court.
But they will only have standing in the court if they pay?
Well, they'll have standing for a refund action if they pay. But if they don't pay, we would have to take an affirmative collection action to collect the tax. And then they would challenge it there, and they would say that they were
Challenge
improperly.
it where? In Superior Court?
In Superior Court as well. The city would have to go forward and bring a collection action in order to collect the tax. And to make the collection action, we would need to prove that we were correct in making our assessment. Actually, that's not true. The taxpayer would bear the burden of proof of proving that we were incorrect in making the assessment, but they would have the opportunity to prove that our reclassification was incorrect or whatever else had gone into the assessment.
Now, we simplified our categories to 9, as was testified earlier. Did we define them more clearly?
That was before my time in public finance. I don't recall if any changes were made to the retail and wholesale definitions. I don't believe they were changed.
We
No,
were
that's
close.
not what I'm saying. We reduced the number of categories in the definitions from, what they say,
75 to 9.
75 to 9.
Right.
But did we increase the definitions of those categories?
I don't believe there were supposed to be any substantive changes to taxpayer classifications in that process.
Right. Well, the classifications in terms of the code itself, there was not any extensive changes because that would equate to a Prop 218 issue. But what we did was we took, working with the Business Tax Advisory Committee, we came forward with a reduction in the number of tax categories,
That's
basically
not my
looking
question.
at like.
I'm not even asking about. I'm just asking, did you expand the definition so it'll be a
Yes.
little clearer?
Yes.
Not. I mean, because how can you reduce to 9 but not expand the definitions?
Yes, it was expanded, but the number of categories
The
were
question
reduced.
was, the reason it was reduced is because it's very complicated to find the right category, right?
Right.
And this would simplify it so that you fall into one of these 9 categories so that the rates would be a little more consistent. But you got to have more definitions so that they could find where their business falls into. 'Cause
Yes.
some of the definitions I've heard today are very ambiguous. I mean, professional, I don't know what that means. I mean, geez. So they're damned if they do and damned if they don't. If they either get into arrears with the city or they get into arrears with somebody else, or not get into arrears, but they get into hock with somebody else because they have to pay the money and then fight. There's just got to be a better way to do that. It just doesn't seem right.
May I ask a question? How is it that the city is not bound by Board of Review rulings? This idea that the current board says, oh, the prior board made a mistake. Think about that. What if the taxpayer said the prior board made a mistake? If it's an actual ruling and impartial, then it applies equally to both sides. And even if the city made a mistake, they're stuck with it.
Well, if the city made a mistake, is there some liability there?
Yeah, couldn't maybe get the legislature.
Excuse me. Is there some liability there?
There's no liability on behalf of the city if they make a mistake in an audit or a board of review hearing that I'm aware of. But as far as the board of review determination being a final ruling, a taxpayer has no obligation to abide by a board of review hearing. The next year they could if a taxpayer claims, for instance, the multimedia classification we heard of earlier, and a board of review determination says, no, you're not multimedia, you're actually profession and occupation. The next year, the taxpayer could say, well, I disagree. I'm going to claim multimedia this year. And the Office of Finance would have to then audit them, go through our process, determine their profession and occupation, and go through the board of review determination again. The board of review determination is not a final ruling with respect to a taxpayer. The taxpayer is free to disregard it for subsequent periods. It's not.
But in this case, there was an audit.
Exactly. That's the process that has
Now
to happen.
they're saying that the Board of Review misinterpreted the audit. I mean,
Well, I can't speak to that. I don't know what happened in this taxpayer's case, but taxes are difficult.
I will
matter.
tell you, the city attorney's office wrote a detailed analysis of our case in 1993, and we have that here, where they presented the logic for why they did what they did in 1994. So this is a matter of they don't agree with their predecessors. But as a business, you have to know what your tax rate is. If you're told by the city, here's your classification, here's your rate, and you don't change your business, and there's no new law passed, what happens is the auditors came in and just ran roughshod over us.
Council member, if I could please speak, because I'm sorry, but you're incorrect. The actual audit findings back in 1994. Sorry, I can speak about classification, right?
Not about this taxpayer.
Okay, never mind.
never mind.
I can't speak.
Councilmember, we can't speak about individual taxpayers.
Right, we can't. But I
I
would
give you
say
permission.
I'm
No.
sorry, it's inappropriate. We can't speak about individual.
Well, this isn't a court. I'm not.
Okay,
I'm
but-
not going into
I
that
have a
depth.
question
But,
that
what concerns me, regardless of what the clarification of the facts are, is that it's hurting businesses, and no matter what you say, we screwed up. We either screwed up then or we screwed up now. We can't be right both times.
I just have to
One
say
decision is diametrically opposed to the other.
the audit cases stand on their own. It's based on the facts that are available at the time for that particular audit period. Those facts can change with a different audit period. The fact that the board overruled an earlier decision, we did seek counsel from the city attorney's office because the board has a city attorney liaison that advises the board. The board was advised by the city attorney's office that they can overrule an earlier decision, and that there is case law out there that allows for that to happen. But we now. But the mayor has requested that we now address this law, and this is the way to address the law by asking the council, subject to the approval of the mayor, to have the city attorney's office draft an ordinance that would preclude the city from collecting back taxes as a result of a board of review overturning a prior decision. The mayor indicated in his letter to me that there is not a problem with the operation of the Office of Finance. He has an issue with the law. And so this is the way to address the law, and this is what we're proposing to address it.
Okay,
May I just say one thing about this Board of Review?
we're not gonna resolve anything today. All I'm going to do is ask for them to come back in about a month, I guess. So, but I've heard enough to know that we have to do something different. And that's why I want the CLA and CAO to review the report to see what other possible outcomes we might have. And in all fairness, I cannot I don't know the facts, and I would have to trust your facts, and this isn't a court of law, and I'm not here to make a determination about who's lying and who's telling the truth. I'm not making a judgment on that score. What I am saying is that there seems to be a problem with our definitions relative to classifications of businesses, and we might still have more work to do, and you know, I'm not understanding all the legal issues. I disagree with some of them. Just because it's law doesn't mean it's right. And I don't understand how, well, I'm making assumptions again, but rather than go down that road, let me just, we've had the public comments. I hurt to hear your story, and I only hope that somehow we can remedy it. I've never flipped a coin 24 times and got the same thing. I know that, but in any case, which is a separate issue, how can an organization? Is there something that triggers an audit other than just randomness?
There are many factors that we use to determine whether a business should be audited. In this particular case, well, let me just say in general, we look at various factors. We look at the gross measures that were reported by business, and we have various variance reports that we look at. If there is a significant underreporting of the tax, it is potentially subject to audit. If the classification appears to be incorrect, we do look at that as well. And there are many other factors. So I think we have really worked very hard at developing risk assessments for determining whether a business should be audited or not. And
All right. I just wanted to ask that question.
Okay.
So it's not just an issue of randomness. I mean, that
Right.
was,
Right.
it was either a yes or no, whichever is appropriate. Okay, then I'd like to instruct the CLA and CAO to review the Office of Finance report and report to committee with potential outcomes. I think the mayor's office is okay with that. To the extent we are going to change this process, we want to do it right, and so that will be my recommendation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item number 3.
Item number 3 is a communication from the mayor and Office of Finance report relative to proposed business tax reforms and related matters.
Okay. Antoinette Cristoval, Office of Finance. This report is in response to various new business tax reform measures that were proposed by the mayor and city council, building on the 2004 major reforms, where over $90 million annually in tax relief is now provided to LA businesses. Finance recommends using a previous contractor to conduct the analysis. Since our report as of October 15th, several new tax reform measures have been proposed. In addition, your committee referred the measures to the reestablished Business Tax Advisory Committee to consider and make recommendations. The scope and cost estimate for the contractor's proposal will need to be revisited after input from BTAC. So given these factors, Finance is recommending that your committee direct Finance to negotiate and execute a sole source contract with the contractor at the time that did the 2004 overhaul Muni services, following input from the Business Tax Advisory Committee and pending approval of funding in a separate report back to Council.
Okay, we have one card on this item. Maya Zutler.
Do you want us to stay up, or?
Why not?
Good afternoon, Maya Zutler from VICA, Valley Industry Commerce Association. I'll just make these brief comments because we wanted to come here today in support of this item, and we hope that this committee and the city departments, including the Department of Finance, will do whatever it takes to attract and retain businesses here in the city of Los Angeles, and we hope that that would be our theme here for the coming year to do anything that it takes, whatever it takes, to attract and retain businesses here in the city of Los Angeles. The previous round of business tax cuts generated increased revenues to the city and helped businesses grow. And we want to build on this success and improve the city's business climate in 2010 and beyond. And we have sent out a letter in early November to the city council members about some recommendations that VICA made, including reducing the gross receipts tax by another 25%. That was the first recommendation. We had a list of about 6 recommendations, and we hope that those recommendations will be taken seriously and reviewed in the coming year by the city department so that we can attain this goal of attracting new businesses and retaining businesses here in the city of Los Angeles. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I have no problem with the contract with Muni Services. Would recommend that we direct the Office of Finance to negotiate and execute a sole source of contract with Muni Services as the Office of Finance recommendations or reported their recommendations. So I would recommend we adopt that, send it on to council. Secondly, I would like to refer the mayor's letter of recommendations regarding tax reform to the Business Tax Advisory Committee for review. And thirdly, I'd like to review this matter to Budget and Finance at the request of Councilman Parks, as this does have budget implications.
Sir, can I just ask a question, point of clarification? Sure. The initial proposal from Muni Services had limited scope in terms of motions that had been introduced, and that report is somewhat dated now, their proposal, because a number of new motions were introduced by your committee and yourself, as well as other council committee members. And so the scope and the cost estimate will need to be reevaluated. And of course, with BTAC now having to vet and look at the motions, they may want to change the scope or modify the scope based on what we previously submitted. So what we're asking is that we first, before we move forward with coming forward with a contract, that we do seek input from the Business Tax Advisory Committee as to the scope, so that the new contract and the cost estimate could be referred to your committee and the council for consideration.
I would like to incorporate that in the recommendations.
Councilman, in that case, since it seems to be something to modify, which we are not in receipt of, perhaps continuation until they forward.
Yeah, what are you specifically
let me just
requesting?
Our recommendation is that you allow us to proceed with negotiating and executing a sole source contract following input from BTAC, and then coming forward with the contract and the cost to get council approval for funding.
I don't have a problem with that, except that the next stop is Budget and Finance.
Oh, okay. Our report can move forward based on the recommendations that we have.
Yeah, but if you're not going to have an amount for the contract,
that's correct, right?
What good is it going to do in Budget and Finance?
Okay, I'm fine with that. So we should continue it. Is that
the best way would be to continue until you know exactly what your
Is that what you were thinking?
That would be the cleanest way to handle it. Otherwise, it goes over there, and then if a subsequent report is submitted, it's going to wind up back here in committee, and further, you run the risk of delaying.
We're fine with that.
Well,
that's fine.
So how much time do we have here?
Well, we need to meet with BTAC, and we are, I don't know. I think BTAC, I don't know who the members are as of yet. I understand that they're very close to forming the committee, and the expectation is that they will hold their first meeting sometime in January. I would expect that to be one of their items on their agenda for discussion, the various motions that have been introduced by the mayor and council, taking into consideration the 2004 reform and the work that was done by the consultant at that time, and coming forward with the scope that should be reviewed.
Are they aware that this is coming at them?
Our report is public. I think they are aware that all of the motions that have been introduced, I believe previously you referred those to the Business Tax Advisory Committee, and many of those, or all of those, are actually in our report, except there have been new ones since that time. So I believe BTAC is aware.
But
yes,
BTAC is aware that this is going to be referred to them for consideration?
I don't know if I don't know who the committees are at this point, but my intent is to make sure that they receive a copy of the Office of Finance report once I know who the members are and meet with them and discuss it at their
So you
first
would want
meeting.
me to continue this until,
It would be subject to BTAC's input. So if assuming that the BTAC is formed and they have their first meeting during the month of January, I would think that no later than February, we should be able to come back with a revised scope.
so, say the first meeting in February?
Yeah.
That's fine with me.
Okay.
Okay, in the meantime, we're making those other recommendations. I think that's it for this item. Did we cover everything? Oh, yeah, we're except with the exception of referring this to Budget and Finance. So we're going to continue the matter. We're going to refer the mayor's letter of recommendations to BTAC.
Okay.
And we're going to hold the adoption of the I think we can direct you to negotiate. I'm just hesitant to,
Because.
but they have no authority.
At this point, customarily, it'd be an instruction, council would say, go forth, execute X, Y, Z for X term, X dollars, doing Y scope of work, but we're kind of have a question mark as to some of the details, it sounds like, in the conversation.
So then,
Councilman John Wickham with the CLA's office. The previous action that you took on creating BTAC, et cetera, there were a number of recommendations, 8 or 9 in those. I believe it was Council File 09-1914, included a recommendation for the Office of Finance to seek the contractor to do this work. So I think what you can do is acknowledge that they found a contractor, a sole source situation, and under that instruction that was already adopted by council, allow Office of Finance to work with BTAC to finalize the scope and come back to you with a final recommendation.
that's exactly what I meant to say.
Okay, in that case, we pretty much this file then duplicates that instruction to a great degree from the sound of it. So,
Okay.
in which
So we'll work with the clerk to make sure that this is clarified and simplified, and maybe there's a cross-reference to 09-1914 we can handle here, and that will simplify
perhaps
it.
we can combine them when a time comes to come back and
Sounds good.
then
Okay.
deal with the whole matter.
Thank you. Okay, I think now we're done. And oh, this is on item number 4. Okay.
Item number 4?
Item number 4.
Item number 4 is a motion, Gruel Zine, relative to implementing a delinquent city business taxpayer list program.
Okay, Antoinette Cristoval, Office of Finance. In regards to this particular motion, the Office of Finance did include in our budget package for the 08-09 fiscal year a recommendation to develop a top tax debtors list that would be published on our website. We followed the Franchise Tax Board. They actually have a top debtors list on their website. And so the council directed our office to proceed with that. An ordinance was approved and adopted by the council on January 4th, 2009. Following adoption of the ordinance, Office of Finance proceeded with the program. To date, the program, we have about, I think it's 163 top debtors that are on our website with a tax liability of about $142 million. And we have collected so far about $4 million. So we anticipated about collections of about $1 million annually. We have far exceeded that. And so the program is actually working. It's getting the attention of the debtors that they,
Okay.
we advise them in advance to let them know that they can come forward and settle with our office or the city attorney's office. And we advise them that they can settle within the 30-day period. If they choose not to, we advise them that we will post their name and the amount that they owe and the type of tax.
Councilman Parks, I assume you're representing Councilman Parks?
No, he's with my office.
He's with your office, okay. I thought you were his staff coming forward. He is requesting that we develop a strategy, but what it sounds like, well, he's requesting the Office of Finance and City Attorney to, with the assistance of the CAO, CLA, to work together to create a specific enforcement strategy and procedure to collect the 250 delinquent debts. Now, it seems to me that the strategy is the posting.
Oh, it's more than that. Actually, we just posting the debt is not all that we do. We proceed with all collection efforts. We refer the debtors to the city attorney's office for Superior Court filing. We refer the debtors to the city
Do we
contract.
continue to post the 250 on an ongoing basis?
Yes. Right now, it's only 163, so we're not up to the 250. To be placed on the list, you have to have
100,000.
right, correct.
So
correct.
do we have 250 over 100,000?
There are some that are in the process of being reviewed that will be added. I don't think we're up to we're not up to 250, but there are. And what we do each week, we send out letters and we add debtors to the list. It started out, I think, with maybe 20, and now we're at 163. But we do proceed with a number of collection efforts. I think having all these tools in place helps collect the amount that's due. Using the city attorney's office through processing Superior Court claims or cases, utilizing our outside collection agencies to attempt collection, as well as internal processes that we have and the top debtors list. We also share the top debtors list. It's available on our website, but we also notify periodically the mayor and council and city department heads about the debtors that are on the list, asking that if they are doing business with any of these debtors, to have them contact the Office of Finance to clear their tax matter.
Okay, now, it was my intent to receive and file this motion, but Mr. Parks has requested to have this referred to Budget and Finance.
That's fine.
So his question was relative to the enforcement strategy. I don't know whether that satisfies his request.
Okay.
But you can work with his office to see
yes, absolutely.
If that's what he wanted. And then if not, he can waive it. But my recommendation will be to receive and file the report and send it to Budget and Finance.
All right.
Thank you. Item number 5.
Item number 5 is a motion, Smith-Perry, relative to feasibility of making available business association information to all women business owners who register with the city and related matters.
Actually, yeah, this is yours too. You should just pull up a chair. Let's see, this is a simple one. I don't see the advocates here, but this is relative to directing the Office of Finance to report on the feasibility of making information available on all relevant business associations, not just one NABO. Do we have a specific, what do we do with NABO? Do we do anything? This is asking that we
Mr. Chair, I can make some
provide
comments.
information.
I'm Clay McCarter with the CLA's office. This original motion directed them to, when a new business registers with the city, that they be told about this association. And so our office is recommending that instead of singling out that one association to just the women business owners, all new businesses that register with the city would be provided a list of all the business associations to help them start up their business. So we're recommending that someone, we say the Office of Finance, could put a list on a website of all the associations just to help out the business community.
I concur, but I would like to know what the list is.
Okay.
To make sure that.
We haven't prepared a list yet, but.
Right. So I was actually going to direct the Office of Finance to come up with that list, but is there a better way to do it?
I would prefer that we work with the CLA's office if they're amenable to that.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I did some research looking at other cities on their small business sites. They'll have a list of the various Chamber of Commerce organizations or other associations in the local area that people can contact.
Okay, then why don't we continue this matter with the direction that you report back when you have a list? How long do you think? 30 days? Or?
30 days is fine.
Okay, the next meeting after 30 days. Thank you very much. That's easy ones. Item number 6.
Yeah.
Item number 6
Finance.
is the CLA and Office of Finance reports in response to motion Garcetti Parks relative to the impacts of the expiration of federally mandated LA Empowerment Zone and renewal community and related matters.
Okay, Clay McCarter with the CLA's office. We were directed to report with the Office of Finance on the impacts of the expiration of the Federal Empowerment Zone and Renewal Community. These federal zones, just to give you some background, 1994, United States Department of Housing and Urban Development designated the communities of Pacoima, Boyle Heights, the East Downtown Corridor, the Historic Corridor, Central Avenue, Slauson Industrial, Broadway, Watts, Firestone, and Willowbrook as the Empowerment Zone. And in 2002, HUD designated a renewal community in the areas of the Mid-City, South, Southeast Los Angeles, Pico Union, Central City, Westlake, Chinatown, and Echo Park. These zones are set to expire December 31st of this year. And these zones, they're granted federal credits, federal incentives to include an employment credit, which is a tax credit for businesses that employ an individual living and working in that specific zone. There's also some additional incentives, such as a 0% capital gains rate. And the city of Los Angeles, in order to provide more incentives to these businesses, in 1995, they established the LA Empowerment Zone, which grants them specific business tax incentives, including a minimum business tax rate of $25 and some other incentives if businesses move from outside the city into the zone or from outside the zone into the zone from the city. Mm-hmm. Okay. So looking at the impact, if the federal zone expires at the end of the month, that will also mean that the city zone will expire as well. So the impact of that city zone, the Office of Finance, they reported that since inception of the zone in 1995, 140,000 businesses have received business credits totaling $71 million. Looking at 2009, 16,000 empowerment zone businesses they received about $6 million in the business tax relief. So if the zone went away in 2010, they would be liable for an additional $6 million in the business tax. If you look at the legislation to extend these zones, there are 2 bills that would extend the zone until 2015, but it's very doubtful that will be heard in Congress in order to make that happen. There's one other bill, H.R. 4213, which passed the House, but is not expected to be heard in the Senate in time. So if that is approved and signed by the President in 2010, it would retroactively extend the zone for 1 year, starting in January 1st. Mm-hmm. So just to summarize the report, if you look at the impact, the economic impact for 1 year in the city's empowerment zone, it's $6 million.
Okay, why is it that the state and local enterprise? Did you say the enterprise zone or the empowerment?
The empowerment zone.
You said the city could not continue our
right.
empowerment zone.
Right.
Why is that?
The city attorney has said that. You can.
City attorney staff is here and they can speak to that matter.
Good morning, Deputy City Attorney Dan Whitley. The city empowerment zones were enacted pursuant to the grant of federal authority by the Housing and Urban Development Secretary. Once we lack that grant of authority, we're going to be in violation of the Commerce Clause should the differential tax rates remain in the city empowerment zones.
Okay. So, what's the likelihood we could get the extension?
It is fairly likely, but it won't be in time. The likelihood of it happening before the end of the year is very poor.
So there's going to be a gap.
There's going to be a gap. Yeah.
Do you have any idea how
long? No. The worst case, I heard April, but maybe January, February, it could get get approved.
So Rangel's bill will be out.
It's
It is out of the House.
It was out of the House. It's in the Senate, but I
If that
heard.
passes, we'll be okay.
Yeah. And it gets us one more year.
And what actions are we taking to make sure that happens?
The mayor's office in D.C. is lobbying to get H.R. 4213
Okay.
out in
now,
the Senate.
I understand we want to send this report to council. Is that?
That's, yeah. It's more of an informational,
Just-
there's no recommend.
There's a placeholder on tomorrow's agenda. Can we get it on there, or do we need to, or?
The placeholder's there, so at present, if we go with the recommendation of CLA, it'd simply be to receive and file this report. It's information only.
I mean, regarding the ITGA committee today adopted a resolution that would push for, that approved 1677 and S1222, plus the HR 4213. So that's going to go to council, and that's going to be the official support of the city for those bills. So it seems we could just
Receive and
take this
file.
as receive a file for information, yeah.
Okay, that would be fine. We'll receive and file and put it on the agenda for tomorrow, council.
It'll be
Thank
on.
you. Thank you, for information purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, item number 7.
Item number 7 is a CLA report in response to the motion Garcetti, Gruel, Perry, relative to incentives offered by the major California cities to meet the goals of the state enterprise zones.
Okay, this is my report as well. Clay McCarter with the CLA's office. So this report, I first provide some background as to what defines the enterprise zone, empowerment zone, and renewal community, and I list all of the various credits that each zone provides. And then I also looked into other cities to see, because other cities have specific incentives that they offer to their own zones. I looked at San Diego, San Francisco, and Fresno. I didn't really find anything that they did that we're not doing that's something amazing that we should take a look at. San Diego has a job referral service that assists enterprise zone businesses. They help with recruiting and pre-screening of new employees, but in talking with CDD, we have a similar program.
Well, we almost lost our enterprise zone last year in the San Fernando Valley. And the only reason we didn't lose it was because the governor intervened at our request and designated some kind of weird linkage to the Hollywood enterprise zone, and so we exist. But that's not the right way to do things. The one criticism of the enterprise zones is that the local jurisdictions don't do a good enough job to explain the benefits of the enterprise zones in terms of revenue generated as opposed to revenue lost. So what was the problem, and have we fixed it, or do we need to do more?
I think Cliff with CDD can answer that.
Councilman Cliff Weiss from the Community Development Department. There were some shortcomings in the application in 2006. We believe we've addressed those, although we were again unsuccessful with the harbor designation, primarily because of our unemployment statistics were not as distressed as some of the other communities that were provided designations. And those are things that, there isn't any fix for that type of issue. When a rural...
Unemployment was the highest in the state.
Based on the 2000 census data in comparison to the cities that did win designations, ours did not, were not as distressed. So we lost quite a few points in that score, and that's not something that, a fix is available for. The statistics speak for themselves. But, we've tried to address some of the other areas, and our application was very competitive in almost all of the other categories. So we've tried to do a better job in getting these applications done as far as the quality of the work. We had a consultant this last time around. In 2006, we did not have a consultant to assist us with that. We did it with in-house staff. And, I worked on that myself, and I can tell you that trying to do 3 simultaneous applications of that complexity was extremely daunting task. Make no excuses for that, but it was a difficult task.
So that's no longer a problem?
I believe that as long as we use the best available resources as far as qualified consultants, I think our chances are much better.
I'm a little confused. You said that we lost the designation because other jurisdictions had higher rates of unemployment. I don't believe there were any new designations of enterprise zones in the state of California.
This year, there were 5 designations, not new designations, but re-designations. And in 2006, I believe there were, I forget the number, it was about another 6 or 8. There's 42 designations.
These are re-designations.
Yes.
Now, did the state shrink the number of enterprise zones?
No, but there are 42 that are allowed by law. They don't all expire at the same time, so each round there's a different number. In 2006, I believe there were 26.
Okay. First of all, you're talking to a state senator who served on the committee that designated the enterprise zones. Okay, so what I'm not understanding here is the state doesn't typically eliminate enterprise zones. We had 42. There's tremendous competition to get more, but we haven't created new designations since I was there. But how do you lose one? I mean, to lose one, you usually have to be a really bad player. Like you have to not submit your reports or something.
The way the system is set up, when the designations expire, you don't simply reapply as a continuing designation. You basically have to compete with everybody else starting at the same place. You don't get any extra points for having had one previously. So you're in competition. For example, in 2006, we were in competition with some 40 other cities, and they're all graded on the same scale. So when came time to grade the applications, we did not measure up in terms of our 3. And other cities that had better applications, better demographics, they beat us out.
But it was only cities that were previously designated.
Cities that had never had an enterprise zone could compete along with us. And there are a lot of competition for these. This year there were 5 designations, and I believe 14
We didn't
applicants.
compete, but the governor included us in Hollywood.
Yes, because Hollywood was a successful application, a successful designation.
Well, as a representative of the Valley, I'm wondering why was our San Fernando Valley application not successful, but our Hollywood application was?
The applications were almost identical. The only significant difference would have been the demographics. So that put the Hollywood application over the line to success and left the other 2 just below that on the list. Given the fact that all 3 were at the bottom of the scale,
So
we were only allowed the Hollywood initially.
The Harvard designation was lost to who?
I don't have the list in front of me, sir. They were primarily rural cities and counties.
Is there any effort to get the governor to tie them into something else?
We're working with the state to use expansion authority.
We have capacity?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Then, what I wanted to do was ask that we hold this matter and ask the CLA with the assistance of the Office of Finance and Community Development Department, to report back in 30 days on ways to improve the city's state enterprise zones, empowerment zones, and renewal communities, and to develop a legislative agenda for city to pursue to improve these zones. That will be my recommendation.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Item number 8.
Item number 8 is a CDD report relative to the status of businesses participating in the state enterprise zone hiring tax credit program and income derived from program fees.
Councilman, again, Cliff Weiss with the Community Development Department. This item was submitted about a year ago for information purposes. Give a rundown on the amount of participants in the Enterprise Zone program. The updated figures for 2008, 2009, from the earlier figure of 1,300 vouchers per month, we are now up to about 2,000 vouchers per month. Last year, we received a little over 23,000 vouchers for the year, with revenue to the department of $578,000. We estimate that will go up to about 24,000 vouchers this year, and revenue of about 570, about the same amount of revenue, just close to it. We continue our efforts to bring as many businesses as possible into the zones. We have held business seminars throughout the city on a regional basis at least 3 times a year. We also get a list of all new businesses in the city from Office of Finance on a monthly basis, and we send them letters to indicate to them what kind of benefits are available to them. And we also use other resources such as the council offices, local elected officials from other jurisdictions.
What were the original goals?
The original goals basically
You
are...
said 23,000 vouchers last year. How does that equate to success? What were the goals?
The goal last year was 15,000 vouchers,
Okay.
so we were considerably over that. My intention this year is to increase the goal, given the fact that vouchers are coming in faster.
15,000 was acceptable to the state?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So this year you want to increase it to?
I'd like to increase it to about 25,000. The amount of increase is going to be a little less because businesses are not hiring as much as they were in the last 2 years. So we don't expect that kind of growth, but we certainly expect some growth. We have a new territory in East Los Angeles, and that's a fertile area for us to pursue. And we're hoping to get some expansion areas, you know, in the San Fernando Valley early next year, and that will give us another huge base from which to draw new businesses from.
We just authorized $15 million in lending to small businesses, and I understand there were dozens of applications, I think 70 or so applications in the pipeline. I'm getting my programs mixed up, but it was at least a couple of dozen applications that were in the pipeline. Wouldn't they be prime targets for the enterprise zone credits?
Yeah, certainly. If they're in the enterprise zone, of course, they don't have to be in the zone in order to take advantage of the lending program. But if they are, then definitely that would be a good contact point for us.
It should be marketed together. All right. I think we just wanted to receive and file this action.
Yes.
Do you have a number of jobs created? Does the voucher reflect a job?
It reflects either a new job or a continuing job, because the voucher program is a 5-year program.
Okay.
So all we can do is estimate the number of new jobs that are associated with that, and it's around a third of the total number of vouchers.
So maybe about 8,000?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Item number 9.
Item number 9 is a CLA report in response to motion Reyes, Han Parks relative to the potential divestiture of all deposits in banking and other financial institutions.
Don't think that's the right motion.
Actually, this report is in response to a motion Alarcon Garcetti Reyes, I believe. As you requested, we took a look at it. There was some supplemental instructions provided at a previous Jobs Committee hearing to further expand the intention behind the motion. The original motion was an effort to use the city's investment portfolio to try and help those in jeopardy of losing their homes to foreclosure.
Okay. Yeah, it's late in the day,
Yeah.
and we just got the report. I'd like to absorb it a little bit. There's some other people that would like to absorb it as well. So I actually wanted to continue this matter to do some of that.
Sure. No, be glad to.
Our initial review is very positive. We just want to sink our teeth into it a little more.
I understand. We did have representatives from Lacers and Pensions as well as the city treasurer here in case you had any questions.
Great. Oh, I should have done this one first, but I apologize for that. In any case, we'll bring this up at the next meeting.
Okay, be glad.
Chair, the city clerk's not in receipt of that particular report, so we'll need that as soon as possible.
That's been filed. It was filed. We'll make sure that the city clerk gets it.
I know that you will. Thank you very much. So with that, we'll just continue this matter 30 days? January 26th? January 26th on the business. Okay, thank you. Item number 10.
Item number 10 is a DWP report relative to participation rates for low-income services for public utilities and related matters.
By the way, I apologize for the length of this meeting. We had to cancel a previous meeting because we were more interested in talking about marijuana. So I apologize to those of you that were affected, particularly those of you that waited for a couple hours at the last meeting. But that's why this agenda is so long. I apologize. Item number 10.
Good afternoon, Melanie Chacon for the Department of Water and Power.
And I'm Darlene Battle, also Department of Water and Power.
Councilmember, you do not have the final report in your hands at this point in time. It's still going through the final review process, but you will have that shortly. Some of the main points that you had asked was regarding the uptake among the low-income customers eligible for the various low-income programs.
Mm-hmm.
So we have identified approximately 536,000 residents that are eligible for either our low-income or Lifeline program.
Mm-hmm.
Currently, we have 239,000 residents that are enrolled, which represents about a 45% penetration rate. You had asked how we, let me bring that back down so I can reach it. You had asked how we compare with other municipalities and investor-owned utilities. As far as the municipalities for SMUD, they have a 59% penetration rate. That's based upon a 92,000 participant level. Glendale had no final data available for their penetration, although they have a 3,695 participants at this time for their low-income program. They have a Lifeline program, which is our senior citizen program that has about 4,735 participants. However, they are in the process of phasing that out. Pasadena had no penetration level available for us, but they have 4,200 participants in their low-income program. Burbank only offers a Lifeline, a senior citizen discount, and their enrollment figures were not available at the time that we were preparing the report. All of these municipalities also verify income, as do we. The investor-owned utilities are self-certified, and their penetration level is much higher. Southern California Edison is at an 87% penetration with 1.2 million out of 1.3 million customers. San Diego Gas and Electric in their Orange County region has a 65% penetration, so they have 9,760 of their 14,000 residents. In their San Diego area, San Diego Gas and Electric have a 78% penetration level, 251,000 of their 321. And PG&E has an 81% penetration level. They have 1.2 million of their 1.5 million residents participating in the program. The increase since the last time we saw you in September of '08, at that time, we were at 184,387 residents that were participating. And again, we're now at just about 239,000. So we've been able to increase by 54,474 since September. The residents, the majority of them are low income because we have the combined program. And our current programs that are available continue to be our low income, our Lifeline, our refrigerator exchange program, and our Project Angel program.
Mm-hmm. So we're not doing very good.
Oh, I think we're doing great.
Your general manager just told me he thought you were doing horribly.
We had a goal of 225,000 participants
Our goal
as of
should
June.
be 90%.
Our goal should be 90%. However, I want to remind you of the audit that was performed by the Controller's Office in 2001. At that point, we had 170,000 participants in our program. We were not requiring proof of income.
Mm-hmm.
There was a pilot program that was performed at that point in time. 15,000 residents were reviewed. 50% of those 15,000 or 7,000 were not qualified to be on the program.
That is not accurate.
That's
you were
according
never
to,
able to sustain their qualifications because they weren't at home.
According to the findings here in the audit, that's what was stated here. And of those 7,000,
What was stated?
it says a pilot study performed in 2001 indicates that many customers who currently receive the low-income subsidy do not meet the low-income criteria,
Which is what?
which currently is 30,500.
No, that's not what they meant. If they weren't home, they didn't qualify them.
What they're saying, let me continue. The pilot study involved 15,000 active low-income discount program participants. 7,000 of these customers were selected because they had high levels of consumption, indicating that they may not be low income, and the remaining customers were randomly selected. The results indicate about one-half of the customers were not eligible for the low-income assistance. Approximately three-quarters of the customers determined to be ineligible customers did not have required paperwork. And until recently, and again, this was 2001, LADWP customers were self-certified. Customers completed an application, indicating income, but were not required to submit proof of income such as a tax return. So in early 2002, the low-income rate ordinance was modified so that all applications for low-income eligibility must be supported with documentation acceptable to the department. So at this point in time,
So they weren't eligible by virtue of not submitting documentation.
they were not eligible because their income, as an example, we had people that were far above the income requirements that were on the program. That's what the findings found. Because we had no review process in place, we just took people at their word. Many people were receiving this benefit and they were not eligible for it.
But if Edison is penetrating at 80% with a class that is 60% greater, or I'm sorry, 120% greater than ours.
But they're self-certifying. So they have an 81%. Edison is at 87%. So again, they have 1.2 million of their 1.3
Okay, so what are we
million
going to do to
customers.
improve the situation?
We're going to continue our partnering.
We're overcharging how many people? 220,000?
Overcharging?
Yeah.
Okay.
These are people that qualify for a discount that they're not getting.
Based
We're overcharging them.
Based upon our preliminary estimates, there's 536 residents, and so what we have done already is stepped up our outreach efforts. We are meeting in several community events. We have the
Did you establish
advertisements.
the Low-Income Lifeline Oversight Committee as was directed by the
Yes,
council?
we have, and it meets weekly every Thursday at 2 p.m.
Okay, and so are we going to participate in one EAP?
At this point, that doesn't look like that's going to be a viable option for us. We think that a better option would be a partnership with Experian, because we are mandated to recertify.
What is Experian?
Experian, the credit bureau. And so at this point, we are because we're mandated to recertify all these residents within a 3-year period.
Can we recertify them with the 1EF process?
We're still, we've attended the presentation, but again, at this point in time, that isn't something that we are moving forward with. We think that there's going to be better alternatives.
Why? Why would Experian be a better alternative than 1EF?
Because we're looking to, because of the number of residents that we have, the 239,000, we need to recertify them. We can go ahead and do a preliminary qualification based on their credit profile. So that's how they can help us, because, again, this is tied to income, and we want to make sure that only income-qualified residents are getting the discount.
So they have to go through a credit check?
No, Experian has a credit profile for each one of our residents. So rather than asking residents to provide proof of income, again, either a tax return, a pay stub, whatever it is that they want to provide to us, we would go ahead and work with Experian based upon their credit profile to determine whether or not they fall within this criteria, and they wouldn't have to provide anything back to the department, but it would satisfy both the controller's office request to ensure that we're monitoring this, and we would then those residents that fell outside of the guidelines or a red flag was raised, at that point we would
What
send
about the residents that don't have credit?
and there are some residents that don't, but according
A lot of them. We have 300,000 unbanked in this community.
I think we have a whole lot of customers that only pay by cash, but according to Experian, they have a credit profile on just about everybody from what they're saying. So we're planning on starting a pilot in January.
I'm still not understanding why that's better than 1EF.
Again, 1EAP is something on the table, and it's something that we are considering, but we're looking for immediate results. We're looking for immediate increase in this discount. We want to get the notification out there to these residents that need it the most. So in addition to what we're trying to do with Experian for the recertification efforts, we also want to do the outbound calling. So many of our residents, again, live within areas that have been identified as having a high level.
Wait a minute, the Low Income Advisory Board, is this the one that's internal?
This is internal.
That's not the one that was directed. It was an external group.
I'm unaware of an external group.
I don't know.
Okay.
There was a commitment from your general manager to create an external low-income and lifeline oversight committee, not internal.
Okay, I'll have to follow up on that. I'm unaware of the external.
It's only been 2 years.
Okay. Again, I apologize. I'm not aware of the external committee that was suggested. I do know that there is an internal committee.
Okay, can we continue this matter and have it brought up at the next meeting? And we'll run the tape. Again, because this is not the first time we've had to re-raise this issue with DWP.
Okay.
There seems to be an unwillingness to allow the community to participate in this process. And that concerns me deeply, particularly when the general manager just told me he wasn't satisfied with these results.
Our future goals at this point in time is, as of June 2011, is we are looking to add another 60,000 participants.
Well, that's not good enough. We have 500,000 people that are eligible, but they're not getting this discount, and they need it.
Well,
it's money that is replacing milk money.
I agree with you, and again, that's why we are expending all efforts to try to locate these residents that, for whatever reason, are still unaware that we offer this program.
You're saying you're expending all efforts, but you're saying 1EF isn't ready. You won't go to you didn't form the oversight committee. So no, I don't think you're doing everything that you were either directed to do or were committed to doing. If it weren't for the chairman, Patsouris, we wouldn't be this far. There is a culture of not focusing on this issue at DWP, and it burdens the poor the most. And this is one of the first issues that I brought back to the council 2.5 years ago. And it's 2.5 years, I'm still trying to get the department to do a better job. We've got a long way to go. We got a long way to go. So we'll continue this matter, and I'll expect a full answer as to why that external oversight committee was never established.
Okay.
It was committed to me at the commission, the general manager, and it's still not there. They set up some bogus internal group that, I don't know what they do, circle around and sing Kumbaya, and then they think it's done. It's not going to get done if we're not outreaching to the communities that are out there serving this population.
And we agree with you, absolutely. And again, our goal is to reach every resident out there that
If you
qualifies.
agreed with me, there would have been an oversight committee established 1.5 years ago, or longer. It wasn't done.
Well, I didn't know about it, but now that I do, again, we'll go ahead and report back. I'll also have for you the information regarding 1E app.
Please. Okay, we'll continue this matter.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Okay. There's a shared responsibility on the oversight
Okay.
committee. Okay. Item number 11?
Item number 11 is a CDD report relative to the results of the City Charter Section 1022 review of the city loan of $15 million to the Valley Economic Development Center.
Okay, who can tell me, how many loans have been issued to date? Is this our last item?
This is our last item. Item
No.
13 is our last.
Oh, sorry.
Item 13.
The hospitality sector.
Okay. Yeah, on the loan?
Robert Science, Assistant General Manager, CDD. The program has officially got HUD's approval 2 weeks ago. In the pipeline right now is it's $7 million that VEDC has in the pipeline. There's 1.2 that's just pending final signatures and will be funded by the first
You say
year.
7 million in the pipeline, 7 million in applications?
In applications, they're going through the screening and credit committees right now. One of the conditions that HUD actually put on the condition of use of the money, that they have to approve each and every one of the loans themselves. So it's an additional step that we didn't anticipate when we started the program, but we do have a fairly good communication
Okay.
with HUD.
Do we
on
have
here.
any further Section 8, Section 108?
Yeah, Section 108. Uh-huh.
Section 108
Capacity?
credit?
Yes, right now we have, our total capacity is about 350 million. We have about 171 million that's committed. We do have about 220 that's in the pipeline.
Doesn't add up. Say that again?
So we have about 300.
150 million.
Right. We have about 170 that's committed right now.
Okay.
And then it would be about 200. I'm sorry. We have about 200 million. In the pipeline in various stages, either that they're pending council approval or pending HUD approval, and or are going through the due diligence process and underwriting process. Some of those projects will fall out of that.
Okay, I'm not understanding you. Does the 200 million include the 170 million?
No, the 170 is
That's
been
out.
that's been out.
That's out. So
right.
that reduces the 350?
The 370.
370
to about 200.
And 200 million.
It's in various phases.
But it's all spoken for?
it is accounted for, and until we get.
What is your projection on the fallout rate?
It depends, because right now we're just in very precarious times. And I'll give you an example. The Sears building in CD14, we had $25 million actually set aside for that in Section 108, or $28 million to be exact.
Uh-huh.
That project right now is not moving. There's not a willing seller. So that's one that we know that will drop out.
Okay, at what point might we build the capacity of the BEDC program?
So what we can...
Seems to be working.
Right. There is an
interest, there is a desire. We need financing to hit the small business community in particular. And do you anticipate they will use the 15 million capacity within a few months?
Yeah, probably within the year. They'll use the full 15 million.
Next year or this year?
This calendar year.
This calendar year?
Yeah,
This,
fiscal year.
Fiscal year. Okay, right, so by June 30th.
Yes. And we do have right now in the pipeline an additional $15 million that we are going to come back to council to expand the program.
We have when?
Intent to come in with $15 million to expand.
CDD was going to make that recommendation?
Well, it's been recommended by the mayor's office, it's been recommended by council offices that this program is working and they like the model.
Why don't I just make it a report of this committee out of this motion?
Sure, that's fine.
I mean, can I do that?
Sure, if you wish to add on, certainly.
It would be my recommendation that we expand the program by an additional 15 million and send it on to council.
Right. And just for the record, the 15 million is a part of the 200 that we've accounted
okay,
for.
Great.
So that's where we're getting to.
Great.
So expand by 15 million the program?
Yes.
Right. Okay.
And then in council, if you would come in and explain the loans, perhaps give a few examples of some of this. I know there's some successful programs already, so.
So what we would like to do is actually come back to this committee with a full transmittal, and then be able to bring the full transmittal to council.
I'm going right to council right now. I mean,
we can go directly to council. Then when you submit your report, it'll be.
You want to submit your report here or to the council? Or?
Oh, we could either way. We can submit it directly to council if you could give us 30 days because the transmittal hasn't been complete.
Okay, so you'll be able to finish a transmittal in 30 days.
Right.
We can attach it at that point to this motion.
Okay, in that case, I would trigger another referral, so you'd have to waive that transmittal.
It would trigger another what?
Referral to committee under council rules. Because if they submit something, it's going to be referred to this committee. And
can't you submit the transmittal in response to this recommendation?
I believe it would, if I have the process correct, I think it would be a report back.
It would be a report back, so it would actually be better for me to get this as soon as possible. You take a little bit longer, so it times out correctly. Then we can do it that.
Okay, I'm following him.
I want to make sure I'm following it.
This way you would.
My recommendation is that we add 15 million.
Right.
You will have a transmittal. I don't mind waiving it out of committee, but I want to make sure it's attached to this recommendation.
We can treat it as a report back.
Right.
But you wanted to do it.
Report back, but it's relative to this recommendation, right?
Sure.
So when this recommendation goes to council, it'll have the transmittal attached.
Then he'd have to do his report and submit it before I send it to council then.
That's fine.
Okay.
As soon as you're ready with your transmittal, then we can go to council.
May I say something, Councilmember?
Absolutely.
Taylor from the CEO's office. This report was in response to CDD having to do a 1022 review of the previous 15 million. So my recommendation, if you would care, is to receive and file this item. And once CDD prepares a report, we can report back in 30 days with a brand new transmittal to expand the program.
Well, they're going to have the transmittal, but I've already made the recommendation.
For 30 days, it won't be ready.
I know, but the transmittal will catch up to the recommendation before it goes to council.
Yeah, that's fine with us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank
Because
you.
we're going to have several weeks here with recess and all, so this is, I couldn't take this to council quickly if I wanted to.
No, that's okay. I don't have a problem with that. I just want to make sure the transmittal is ready. And actually, I'm trying to avoid steps.
Right.
So we can save a month by just meeting them at council.
Perfect.
We'll be good then. So we'll say approximately 30 days.
Right.
Okay? Good. Okay, thank you. Item number, I think we've covered 12.
Yes, we did.
Item 13.
Item 13.
Item number 13 is a CAO and CDD reports relative to funding recommendations for our
thought this was on consent.
city-wide hospitality sector initiative.
I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong place. Okay, go ahead.
Barbara
Item
Taylor from the
13.
CEO's office. The report before you provides recommendations for the CDD to execute a contract with the California Labor Federation to provide services related to the citywide hospitality industry sector initiative. The proposed contract term is from January 1st through June 30th, 2011, for a contract amount of $650,000. We recommend approval of the contract, and CDD is here to provide you additional information on the program and to answer any questions.
Okay, what are the anticipated outcomes of this contract?
So the anticipated outcomes that we would train and place up to 300 individuals in the hospitality sector field. But we do have representatives here from the contractor if you would like to get to specific questions on the type of training. But if I could just take a minute and explain that we have worked very, very hard to include organized labor, management, the community-based organization, our workforce centers, and the community college, all into a partnership to do a high roads partnership in the training and the placement of these individuals. This is exactly what the Department of Labor and EDD has been supporting, or I should say the new Department of Labor. The previous administration did not support this type of partnerships. But the reality is that we are investing in this heavy upfront with the expectation that organized labor as well as management will continue the investment through bringing in additional funds as well as utilizing Taft-Hartley funds. It was reported today that currently in the labor contracts, there's a 1 cent per hour that goes into a training fund. On the table for the negotiations, it's going to be requested that 10 cents per hour be put into the training funds. So we're playing a real catalyst role with this investment, and we're making it a win-win between management and partnership for both incumbent workers and new workers. From WIA. It's workforce investment
So it's
dollars.
state money?
It's federal money through the state to us.
Okay, okay. So it doesn't involve city money?
No, no general fund.
Okay, I have one card on this? No, I have 2 cards on this. Purvi Doshi, Council District 8. I know that Councilmember Parks could not be here today. He's recovering, and although he's doing well, I just spoke to him this afternoon. He had a concern about this being sort of one application in an RFP process, but if you would.
Yes, Purvi Doshi with Councilmember Park's office. The councilmember apologizes for not being able to be here today, but we appreciate you allowing us to just kind of give his thoughts on record. He has a couple issues with this RFP and the outcome with the basically one applicant applying for this RFP and them only scoring 4 points above the minimum, which is 70. They scored 74. Basically, we've had discussions with the CLA's office and the CAO's office about making sure that we don't only have one applicant for these RFPs. A lot of time and effort gets put into issuing the RFP, so we'd like more outreach to be done so that more people can apply.
Sorry, guys.
So that's mainly where his issues lie. And if CDD can maybe respond on what outreach was done to get more people to apply to these RFPs.
So I'm going to ask Jaime, who's our Chief Procurement Officer, to speak on that issue.
Jaime Pacheco, Roscoe Community Development Department. In all of our RFPs, we do make them publicly available. We do post them on the internet. We do advertisement on the Business Assistant Network. And we do send out notices to both the council office and other elected officials to let them know that there's an RFP has been released. There are probably a couple of reasons why we had a low response to this particular RFP, but before we get there, I'd like to say that we did have a pre-bidders conference, and we had 16 different individuals and agencies come to that bidders conference to hear what the requirements were. This is a unique partnership in terms of the procurement itself. One of the things that Robert had mentioned earlier was that we looked for this high road partnership. We wanted to have organized labor. We wanted to have business at the table. We wanted someone who had deep knowledge of the particular industry. We wanted a community college component, and there was a requirement that they have a workforce center attached to it. So it really required a collaborative effort. What we were trying to avoid was having a single agency say, I could do it all. We recognize that these kinds of efforts require a really strong commitment and partnership from various agencies. So part of that is that there was a huge requirement that they want to have a deep knowledge of the industry itself, that they have the capacity to bring together folks and focus on a particular sector. The third piece is we talked about sustainability. In the past, a lot of our initiatives were single-funded activities. You would get funding, you do the program, the funding would die, the program would die. One of the requirements we had here was a focus on long-term sustainability. As Robert mentioned earlier, we are looking at Taft-Hartley funds to help support this activity once this funding. This is funded through WIA funds, which we know expire over a period of time. We anticipate we're going to have a funding cliff subsequent to the withdrawal of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act dollars. So we needed to have that kind of partnership that could sustain itself. This is seed money. This is catalyst money. So I think all of those things contributed to the fact that we had one respondent to the proposal. Now, in terms of the actual evaluation process, the procurement process, we've gone to great lengths to revise the way we do our procurement. In the past, we have focused exclusively on city staff reviewing proposals and making recommendations. What we have done over the last couple of years under Robert's leadership is really focused on getting outside reviewers. The score was 74. It did meet our minimum threshold of 70. But we don't have, well, you're within 4 points, you didn't quite make it. It did pass on those criteria. So it is a viable project. It was deemed suitable. If it adheres to federal procurement and local city procurement policies. So I think overall it's a fairly sound and robust.
Why didn't we just do a sole source?
Well, one of the requirements we have, there are 4 ways you can do a sole source under WIA funds. And one is that you have to do a procurement. If there's no response to a procurement, then you can do a sole source. If there's a federal emergency, you can do a sole source. There are very specific conditions on which we can do it. None of these would allow us to do it under WIA.
Okay, so essentially it ended up being a sole source.
No, it was a competitive process. People chose not to participate. It was one agency. Yeah. We could have at that point said we had a non-response and simply done a sole source. But we went through the review process, eligibility determination, looked at the potential for sustainability. So it was a full procurement process.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much for that. Did you have any other comments?
No, thank you.
Tara Murray?
Good afternoon.
Hi.
We've cleared the room, but I'm here if you have any questions. I'm representing the California Labor Federation. And I think both Robert and Jaime said that we've been really excited through this process of building a very unique and we see cutting edge program that will truly be a citywide sector initiative that will raise standards throughout the entire industry and is sustainable long term. So I'm here if council has any questions, additional questions, I'm here to field any of those.
No, I'm happy to recommend this, and I want to thank you for the explanation of the questions that Mr. Parks had. So we will recommend this to be approved at City Council, and I believe it's going tomorrow, right?
Right. Council.
Thank you all very much. With that, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.